So the other thing I'm here to talk about is an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for the Cultivating Community Conserving the Basin project. So this is a program looking at how we can adjust TRPA policy and code to better support housing for our workforce, like the guy with the clear bottom kayaks, and to maintain and even accelerate attainment of environmental thresholds and the regional plan so we can all enjoy clear bottom kayaks now and long into the future. So this EIS is an important milestone for the project, and I hope you'll support a motion to analyze these potential policies in the EIS. So here's what I'm going to be talking about today. In this presentation, the main points I'll cover is what is an environmental impact statement, or EIS. I'll give you some background on that. What is being studied in this EIS in particular, and I'll go over some of the key policies that you all saw in November, review some of those. What's changed since November? So we've made some changes based on the input that we received from you, and I want to talk to you about that. And then finally, I want to go through the next steps for the project and for the environmental impact statement. Next slide. Okay, what's an EIS? So an EIS is our highest level of environmental analysis. It analyzes environmental impacts of a potential action, including alternatives and mitigations for any of those impacts if they're discovered. As John mentioned, you're not being asked to approve anything today with this EIS. You're just being asked really to set the envelope or really the sandbox of study for possible policies and code changes that we could make through this process. So defining the extent of what we could do in this project and analyzing that. So we can scale those back in our final policy, which you'll see early next year. But we can't go further. So we want to cast a wider net right now and create a bigger sandbox where possible. Next slide. Here's a list of the more than a dozen areas that will be studied in the EIS. It covers all of our thresholds, and it's pretty comprehensive from the start. But once we initiate the EIS through the notice of preparation, there will be a public scoping period. Ours will be 45 days, a 45-day period. And that'll be an opportunity to expand this list, to add to it. And in some cases, also to get more specific about what should be considered under each of these categories. So there'll be opportunities for both and to define the scope of what we're really going to look at and consider in this EIS. So more on that later. Next slide, please. What's being studied in this EIS? So that's all detailed in attachment A to your packet, which you had an opportunity to review in November when we did those workshops, if you'll remember. I'll review some of the key points from that attachment and also important changes that we made since November based on your feedback. Next slide. But first, a reminder that all of these proposed policies are based on some project goals and objectives, which you approved last March. So at the heart of this, what we want to do is meet our housing need while maintaining and improving environmental conservation and preservation, that overarching project vision there at the top. And this EIS is going to be really important to understanding if we're meeting that goal through this policy package. Next slide. So John and Julie both touched on this a little bit. These policies weren't just, created by staff in our cubicles. These are based on a really substantial engagement process with you, our leadership, expert advisory groups like the APC, the Tahoe Living Working Group, the Community Partner Group, and with the public. So here are some numbers that we're really proud of from that engagement process so far. The engagement doesn't end here. It continues, but here's where we're at right now. We've had 5 meetings of the Community Partner Group, 5 of the Tahoe Living Working Group, 20 stakeholder meetings. We've had 6 public workshops, and that's not including 3 Spanish mini workshops where my colleague Kaylee actually went to these organizations and met with folks in their own spaces and held small workshops in Spanish. we've had 5 formal items with you all, with the board, 2,224 respondents to our surveys, including 217 responses in Spanish, all adding up to about, we estimate approximately 3,000 people engaged in this process so far, and 600 of whom were engaged in Spanish. And so I think that is really cool and really illustrates the amount of input that went into this proposal. Next slide. Okay. Getting into the key policies that we want to analyze in the EIS, this will be a review. The next 3 slides will be a review for you all. You already saw this in November, and I'll get into what's changed a little bit later in the presentation, but I want to start here with policies to reduce the time and cost to build workforce housing. So the first bullet here is a policy. We want to look at replenishing our bonus unit pools by removing development rights from the commercial floor area, tourist accommodation unit, and persons at one time pools. Persons at one time or payouts are recreational development right, if you're less familiar with those. So taking those development rights and converting those into bonus units. So they'll no longer be able to be used in their pools, but they'll be moved to a bonus unit pool. And some of those bonus units would be reserved for affordable by design housing, which I can speak about later if you're interested. Most of them, however, would go to deed restricted housing. We also want to consider a bonus unit conversion ratio that reflects the relative environmental impact of a bonus unit compared to other development. We want to analyze allowing junior accessory dwelling units, or JADUs or equivalent, as accessory to a single family home. So if you're not familiar with a JADU, these are small 500 square foot or less apartments within the footprint of an existing home. And so this policy would allow these apartments to be created without a separate development right. We want to look at policies that ensure that all new development contributes proportionally to meeting the housing need as demonstrated in our housing needs assessment. We want to look at scaling TRPA fees to reflect the latest data on environmental impact and on the cost of doing business. And finally, single family homes are currently exempt from TRPA environmental review. We want to look at holding small multifamily housing up to a 4-plex to that same standard. And we want to look at doing the same for deed restricted housing that's in a redevelopment scenario or infill development. Next slide. Water quality is foundational to everything that we do as an agency. This water quality component here would update land coverage and stormwater policies to focus on improving water quality while still allowing for compact infill housing in appropriate locations. The idea here is that we want to ensure that multifamily housing doesn't face stricter or more costly water quality requirements than single family. And in doing so, we think we can actually improve water quality overall. And so, for example, one of the policies where we want to analyze here would be to analyze allowing more parcel level coverage for multifamily development, with the goal overall, and this will play out in the EIS, with the goal of actually seeing less coverage basin wide. Maintenance of stormwater systems and BMPs is going to be really key here to these policies. And so we want to analyze new ways to ensure effective monitoring and maintenance of our stormwater systems and BMPs. Next slide. Finally, we want to analyze new strategies for increasing housing choice. So we want to analyze new zoning for missing middle housing. We want to encourage local governments to unlock existing housing for a local workforce, including homes for multi-generational households. We heard a lot from the public and from you all that we need more family-sized housing. And one way to do this could be to allow jurisdictions to increase height and density if they demonstrate progress toward unlocking vacant housing stock. And we have some policy proposals that we think could do that. We also heard a lot of support for a regional housing authority that would coordinate funding and programming for workforce housing across all of our different jurisdictions here in the basin. And so we want to look into that as well. Next slide. What's changed since we last met in November? You'll remember we brought this proposal to you in November and we got some really great feedback. We made some important changes to the proposal based on the feedback that we got from you. And I want to highlight some of those changes here. And as John and I both noted earlier, there's still time to hone in on specific details, to scale stuff back after we've done this analysis in the EIS. And so we really, when we took your input and your feedback, we really tried to err on the side of analyzing more as a best practice for environmental impact statements. So here I want to speak first about tiered project incentives. So this change was really shaped by your input and by input from partners like the League to Save Lake Tahoe and MAP. We clarified a tiered structure for cultivating community conserving the basin policies. So under this tiered structure, all proposed incentives in the policy package would apply to deed restricted, affordable, and moderate income housing. We call that tier 1. There are some incentives for achievable and affordable by design housing. We call that tier 2, and no incentives for unrestricted housing, or tier 3. So I think this change really demonstrates how this project is geared towards meeting our housing need with a focus on deed restricted housing, while still recognizing that there is this big inequity among unrestricted housing. So between large second homes and smaller homes for locals. And that needs to be addressed as well. And it is in this proposal. It's important to remember that the vast majority of our workforce, about 90% of our workforce lives in, rather over 90% of our workforce lives in unrestricted housing. And so we need both deed restricted and unrestricted housing to meet our housing goals. Next slide. So building on that idea of needing both, also based on input from the board and APC, we clarified a method for scaling development rights and fees. So we want to analyze a system of scaled development rights based on conversion ratios. And this is in response to input from the board and the public that you wanted to see incentives, again, supporting housing for families, not just studio apartments, to address overcrowding in our housing stock. So I think this proposal for scaling development rights allows more opportunity for family size housing. And I can talk more about that if you all are interested, compared to some of the alternatives that we had come up with in our previous version of this policy. And we still want to look at addressing the size and impact of homes through mitigation and permitting fees. And so we're proposing to do that as well. Next slide. So we also heard from the governing board and APC that ADU policy should align with state and local policy wherever possible. Ideally, this would pave the way for our local partners to take up permitting of ADUs in the basin. So we set a cap of 1,200 square feet for ADUs to be eligible for the incentives in this package. And that number is consistent with policy in Washoe County, Placer, El Dorado County, and the city of South Lake Tahoe. Everywhere in the basin that ADUs are currently allowed. So we believe that it meets those goals that you all set for us. Next slide. Okay, I got a bonus slide here for you all on the settlement agreement. We got a comment on some points on the settlement agreement with MAP. So we went ahead and added this slide here. As part of the settlement agreement for Tahoe Living Phase 2, TRPA committed to facilitating good faith discussion of the 6 items that are summarized here on this slide. All of these items were addressed in staff reports, minutes, and meeting materials and discussions throughout the process. Some garnered more discussion than others. Some were supported by our advisory groups, like the Tahoe Living Working Group. Others were not. Actually, 3 of these are in the proposal in attachment A. So there's a typo in the slide. The ones with the stars next to it, you can add the refining criteria for additional height to that. That's also going to be analyzed in the EIS. The other three will have the opportunity to continue to consider and discuss through the environmental analysis. So just wanted to make you all aware of that. Next slide. So as we get to the part where where we ask for direction on the environmental impact statement, I want to review a few points about what an EIS is and where we are in this process. So the policies analyzed in the EIS again represent the envelope of study for the project. We want to study the impact of these potential policies, and we can adjust and scale back if needed based on what we find in that analysis. You're not approving anything today. Just directing us to proceed with an environmental analysis that will give you the information that you need to make the right decision when it is time to consider approval of some policy changes. Next slide. So a little bit on next steps. Following, if the board chooses to direct staff to initiate an environmental impact statement, we will release a notice of preparation. That will start a scoping period where we'll ask the public to provide input on what impacts should be analyzed in the EIS. That will last 6 weeks or 45 days. And we plan to have a scoping meeting at the APC on February 11th, where folks can give their impacts, give their spoken input as well as written input. And the whole scoping period will result in a scoping summary report that will go into the official scope for this EIS that we develop. There will be more opportunity for public comment in the summer when we have a draft EIS available. And there will be a review period for that as well. And we hope to have a final EIS and policy proposal in the fall and early 2027 to consider approval. And so with that context, I invite any discussion, questions, and motion to initiate the EIS if you choose.